The unseen signs. The cold night air followed me back to my office. The familiar smell of dust and old paper was a comfort, a truth I could always count on. But the quiet felt different now. Frank's words still echoed, a bell tolling a debt I never knew I owed. I put the box and the photo on my desk. Two ghosts on a field of gray. The photo was of a teenage Angela. Smiling, her face a map of the future that had been stolen from her. Her hair was a bright, unruly mess, her eyes full of a life she had been forced to leave behind. I put the photo down and picked up the worn wooden box, the one Irma had called a gift. I ran my thumb over the wrapping paper, a silent conversation with a ghost. I thought about the last time I had seen Angela. And I thought about the first night I had seen Jackie Angel again, the last time. The cryptic message she'd whispered to me in that diner. Remember December. I had written it off as a half-remembered line from a song, a nervous tick from a frightened woman. Now, it was a church bell ringing in my head. A warning. I thought about the warning Jackie Angel had given me. The one about Rocco Rossini. I'd seen it as a woman trying to warn me of trouble. But what if it was more? What if she was asking me to rescue her from the people who had her held in check? What if the cryptic clue, remember December? Her very own birth month was a breadcrumb she hoped would lead me to her? And what if I, NewzHammer, had been too lost in my own self-pity to hear them? The guilt was a concrete fact. I had missed it all. I had missed my daughter. I had missed her own cries for help. Now, with a new name, Rossini, and a new mission, I was a man on a mission of atonement. I owed them. I owed her. A trail of letters. The wooden box sat on my desk. A time capsule of a life I'd only half lived. I ran my thumb over the old wrapping paper one last time, a silent prayer to a ghost. Then, I pulled at the paper, and the box creaked open like a coffin. Inside was a mess of loose papers, yellowed with time and age. They were small, folded notes, some barely bigger than a postage stamp. I unfolded one, a hand-drawn heart. Another, a scrawled, "I love you," in a teenage girl's handwriting. A third, "I'll never forget our summer." I felt the years melt away. This wasn't a girl from the old neighborhood. This was Angela. This was the light I had lost. Beneath the loose notes, a collection of sealed envelopes, tied with string, caught my eye. The postmarks weren't 20 years old. Some were less than 5. The box, Irma had said, had been sitting at Allison's house for 20 years. The math didn't add up. The only answer, the only possible answer, hit me with the force of a lead pipe. Aunt Allison, that bitter old crone I'd always dismissed, must have had a heart after all. She had been receiving Angela's letters all these years, carefully unwrapping and rewrapping the box with each new one. I opened the letters, starting with the oldest. A baby picture. A lock of hair. A photo of a little girl in a first-grade class. Jackie Angel. Through these silent relics, I was meeting the daughter I had never known. I saw the trail of a woman I had loved and a daughter I had lost. As the years on the letters progressed, the hope faded. The notes became less a prayer for a reunion and more of a confessional. The last letter was brittle, its edges worn thin with stress and despair. The handwriting was shaky. It told of a habit, of the hard dope, and of a face she no longer recognized in the mirror. It ended with a final, desperate plea. She was going to Oakmont, Michigan, to get clean. "Don't come looking now. You wouldn't recognize me if you found me." A name. A place. It wasn't much, but it was more than I had before. My hands, which had been numb with grief, now felt a cold, hard resolve. I had a mission, and I had a name. Case point. A new perspective. The old city was a ghost in the rearview mirror. I watched it fade, the concrete towers shrinking into a hazy smudge of regret. I'd called those streets home. And in all that time, I'd never been more than a day's drive from its limits. My world was a circle of gray, and I was its king. But that was before. The plane was an insult to the senses. It was too fast, too bright, too quiet. It didn't smell of old paper and stale coffee, but of recycled air and new plastic. The flight to Milwaukee was a blur, a forced dream. I got off the plane and felt the world lurch. The air was different here, a clean, empty kind of cold that bit at my skin. I rented a car and started driving. The road was a long, thin ribbon of black cutting through a world of white and green. It was nothing like the city. No sirens. No people. No buildings. Just trees, fields, and an endless sky. It was a world of ghosts. My ghosts. I thought about Jackie Angel, my daughter, and the way her message had been a desperate plea for help I was too blind to see. I thought about Angela, a girl from a world that was now just a memory. A girl who had become a ghost I was trying to find. Case point, establishing a base. I drove for what felt like a lifetime. And then, I saw it. A small sign on the side of the road. "Welcome to Oakmont, Michigan." I slowed the car to a crawl. The city was a quiet, gray whisper in the middle of a scream of green. I found a small motel on the edge of town and rented a room. It was nothing special, just a bed and a desk, but it would be my office while I was here. This was it. This was where I would find her. Case point, the clinic. The clinic, Hope Springs Eternal, was the only one in the phone book. I found it easy. I parked the car across the street and watched for a moment. A lifetime of detective work telling me to observe before I acted. The place didn't look like much, just a place for people to get clean. A place for Angela to get a new start. The kind of place she deserved. A young woman with a kind face and a name tag that read, Jessica, met me at the front desk. I showed her Angela's picture, a photo from a different lifetime. She stared at it for a moment, a flicker of recognition in her eyes, and nodded. "Angela," she said, a sad smile on her face. She was here. Came in a few years back. She was a good girl, but she had a lot of demons. I leaned in, my voice low and steady. "What happened?" The last letter she sent said she was here to get clean. Jessica shook her head, the sadness deepening in her eyes. She tried. She really did. But some people just can't make it. She walked out one day, a few weeks into the program. We never saw her again. She just disappeared. Case point, a Jane Doe. I left the clinic, my gut a knot of cold dread. The air outside felt colder. the vast, empty world of green screaming louder than before. Jessica's words echoed in my head. She just disappeared. I'd heard those words before, and they always ended the same way. I drove to the local police station, a building that looked like a smaller, sadder version of every police station I'd ever known. I spoke to a tired-looking officer behind a desk, an old dog with a weary bark. I gave him Angela's name and the details of her disappearance. He looked at me with a professional, practiced pity and shook his head. "We never got a report," he said. A whisper in the quiet room. "Any unclaimed bodies from around that time?" He sighed, his eyes distant, as if remembering a long, sad list of names. He pulled out a file, its cover stained and worn, and laid it on the desk. "A few years back," he said, "we found a Jane Doe. OD'd on booze and pills in a rundown motel on the edge of town. Nobody ever came to claim her." He handed me a single, faded photograph. The woman in the photo had a face ravaged by addiction, but I knew her eyes. They were Angela's. Case point, the coroner. After concluding with the tired officer at the Oakmont police station, I was directed to the Oakmont coroner's office. There, I collected the last of Angela. A box of cremated remains, 36 cents in change, and a tiny heart-shaped locket, with a photo of me on the left and a photo of Jackie Angel on the right. I gathered these memories and packed up my belongings from the motel room. Case point, the homecoming. The journey back was a blur, a reverse of the one that had started it all. The vast, empty countryside gave way to the familiar concrete and steel of the city. But the world I had returned to was different. I was different. I had left the city running from my past. I had returned with it in a box. The locket in my pocket was a cold, constant weight. It was a reminder of what was lost, and a promise of what was to come. I met Irma and Allison back at the old house. Allison's hard exterior had cracked, replaced by a quiet, shattered sadness. Irma was a ghost of a woman, a flicker of light in a dark room. I handed them the locket, explaining what I had found. They looked at the faded pictures of me and Jackie Angel and wept. The three of us, two old women and a man hardened by a lifetime of regret, were bound by a single, shared tragedy. Case point, a final goodbye. We drove to the cemetery, a silent procession. The sky was a bruised gray, and the air was thick with the promise of rain. We stood by a small, unassuming headstone that read, Jackie Angel Bennett. I handed Irma the box. She clutched it to her chest as if it were a fragile bird. The three of us stood there, a small island of grief in an ocean of quiet stone. I watched as she opened the box and, with a trembling hand, reached inside. The fine dust of the ashes caught the wind, a pale gray whisper carried across the graves. As we were about to leave, Irma turned to me, her eyes filled with a sad tenderness. She held out the locket. "You keep this, Jack," she said. "You were her first love. You should have this." I took the locket, the cold metal a familiar weight in my hand. A single tear rolled down my face. I wasn't just scattering the ashes of my first love. I was reuniting a mother and daughter who had been lost to me for a lifetime. With this final act, the cold trail ended. The pain was still there, but now it was a silent, steel anchor. And in the silence of the cemetery, a man like me was left with a cold, quiet truth. Some things, once broken, can never be made whole again.